God's wondrous grace to me he hath made known, nor I worthy, Christ in love redeemed me for his own. But I know who I have believed and am persuaded that he is able unto him against that day. I know not how the saving faith to me he did impart, nor how believing in his word brought peace within my heart. Good to be here this morning. Kind of something that's been going through my mind a lot lately, which definitely was kind of my thought process in picking out these songs for this morning. Most of you probably know that my wife and I, we had a baby about 3 months ago, and that's been one of the best things of my life. But it's also been something that has showed me that I'm probably not as good of a person as I thought I was, maybe. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that. But I think that God brings these things into our lives to remind us of our need for His grace. You can go through times where you're just kind of kind of coasting along a little bit, and that's kind of where I felt like I was. And then, suddenly we have this little baby, and you can know as much as you possibly can about taking care of a baby, but she doesn't know that. You can read however many books you want, but the baby hasn't read those books. And yeah. There were many nights early on where she'd be up at late hours refusing to sleep, and it showed me that I really have no patience at all in a lot of ways. But again, I feel like that really pointed me back to my need for the grace of God, and So why don't you guys stand with us? Great is your faithfulness, O God of Jacob. You wrestle with the sinner's restless heart. You lead us by still waters into mercy, and nothing can keep us apart. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough. Your grace
I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you when temptation comes my way. When I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. You're my one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
You guys can be seated. We're going to do one more song here. This is one that I don't believe we've sung here before. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's the song "Hymn of Heaven" by Phil Wickham. The only reason that I know this song, I was telling Brandon before we got up here. My little girl really doesn't like her car seat, and so when I'm up here, you're probably going to be hearing a lot about my little girl nowadays. So a lot of times when we're in the car, she's in the back just kind of screaming her head off, and we figured out, Dawn figured out that she really loves music, and we sing to her a lot, and somehow this song is like magical because like it's the only song we found that does this. Like pretty much any time we play it, she just stops crying and just listens. And that's seriously the reason that I know this song is because I've heard it about 1,500 times as we're driving down the road. So I thought maybe we could sing it here. So help us out if you know it. How I long to breathe the air of heaven, where pain is gone and mercy fills the streets, to look upon the one who bled to save me and walk with him for all eternity. There will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day when death will be no more, standing face to face with he who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. And every prayer we prayed in desperation, the songs of faith we sang through doubt and fear, and in the end we'll see that it was worth it when he returns to wipe away our tears. There will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day when death will be no more, standing face to face with he who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. And on that day we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith, and with one voice 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. And on that day we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith, and with one voice 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Oh, forever he shall reign. So let it be today, we shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints. We raise a mighty roar, glory to our God, who gave us life beyond the grave. Holy, holy is the Lord. So let it be today, we shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints.
Well, good morning to each of you. Josh, I once had a little girl too. And it's a very special time, very privileged time, an opportunity. And I was just picturing when Josh's little girl is crying uncontrollably in the back seat, as Don and Josh with the angels and saints raise a mighty roar, maybe it just drowns out her crying and they can't hear. I did appreciate the corporate testimony of faith that a number of times we referenced and declared this morning as we sang together, and that is the sufficiency of God's grace in our life. And if you're like me, I need to reground and refocus probably sometimes many times a day just on that thought alone, that God's grace is enough. And I think the fact that we're here this morning, have made it through another year, is a testimony to God's grace in each of our lives and in our story. So, good morning. Happy Mother's Day. A blessed Mother's Day. Today is a very special day that many of us look forward to. It's probably a day more than any other day of the year when the market feels the effect of flower sales and card sales and phone calls and picnics and all of that kind of very appropriate and good thing. And if you are a mother here today, I hope that you will feel celebrated, that you are celebrated and feel blessed. And just let me remind you that you deserve that, okay? I can hear some of you probably within your hearts just saying, but you don't know me in the raw, and you don't see me at the worst. And we don't minimize that. We don't excuse that. None of us are as we could or should be, right? So we get that. Those still in the flesh moments. But each one of us here this morning, we are who we are, and we're invited to move into and to grow and mature in the areas that still need attention. But back again, motherhood is a blessed thing, and it's worthy of recognition and celebration, and we want to do that here for you this morning as mothers. My sermon this morning, though, is broader than just talking to those of you who have had the opportunity in a physical kind of way to be a mother. It's broader that if you are a woman here this morning, mother or not, I want you to feel honored and celebrated. Levon has mentioned that already in the devotional, because I believe deep within your heart, deep within the DNA that is written on your heart through a God-designed and a God-ordained agenda, deep within your heart, there's a bent, there's a capacity, and there's an empowerment that is motherly in nature. And it is your God-created and designed likeness that is worth giving mention of and celebrating. And this morning, becoming pregnant and having a baby doesn't change that motherly bent and design that's God created in each of your hearts here this morning as ladies. Isaiah 66 talks specifically about the mother heart of God. Isaiah says it's the fruit of the womb that is worthy of being celebrated. And if you're here this morning as a woman, you are created to be fruitful. A role where children spiritual, emotional, and physical, are brought to life. Life that is carried and brought to the point of birth and then delivery. Life that is brought forth through painful kinds of travail. And a life then that is nurtured and provided for. Like Isaiah says, carried on the arm, bounced on the knee, satisfied at the breasts of consolation with comfort and provision. Ladies, here this morning, each of you, with your mothering heart of God, you are created, hear me, with a capacity and an opportunity to be life makers and life givers. Not just in physical kinds of ways, but in spiritual and emotional. Spiritual children, emotional children, physical children for some of you. Each of you ladies here this morning have that bent. You have that capacity within to be nurturing, to be comforting, to be tender, warm, and consoling. The capacity to travail, to persevere and push through the pain of what it will sometimes cost you to be a life maker and a life giver. And we celebrate that here this morning, your motherhood capacities. We celebrate here this morning your spiritual children. We celebrate here this morning your emotional children. And for those of you that have physical children, the fruit of your labor. The opportunity that you've had to travail in bringing to life and then nurturing and providing in the kinds of ways that you do. Dads and men, I hope you don't feel completely left out this morning. I believe there are some of these more motherly characteristics that some of us men might do well in expanding some of our borders a bit and growing in it as well, and maybe especially the one related to the travail of pushing through. Most of us men, we kind of are wimps when it comes to pain, right? Especially when it gets daunting and overwhelming. And let me just remind you men this morning, checking out doesn't usually produce and foster life. The story in Scripture is filled with examples of women who modeled that well to us. And I'd like to focus a bit on one of those stories this morning. And I hope especially you ladies can feel blessed and encouraged and challenged as you face the moments, everyday moments of your life and the opportunities to engage your mothering heart in that. So a disclaimer here before I ask you to turn to the book of Ruth. My wife came to me this morning just before church started and she said, "Do you know what the Sunday school lesson is on?" And I said, "I have no idea," so that's a confession. I was focused on preparing my message for the last couple of weeks. So here we go, jumping back into the book of Ruth, just following a Sunday school lesson that you've had on that. And there will probably be some overlaps, so how do you not talk about this story and overlap? But no excuses. Here we are. Open your Bibles again to Ruth. And chapter 1, King James opens up with it this way. The opening line is, "Now it came to pass." Think about that. Now it came to pass. Behind that opening line, there's a story, right? Now it came to pass. There's a story behind that opening line that has to do with characters, with plot, and with drama that is about to be told. I think in that opening line, "Now it came to pass," that we're also invited to contemplate and to think theologically. Now it came to pass. So is that happenstance and coincidence, or is there something behind in and wrapped up within that line, "Now it came to pass," that has to do with providence? This morning that I'm preaching a sermon on Ruth following a Sunday school lesson on Ruth, is that coincidence or is it providence? Well, I hope that it's providence this morning. Now it came to pass. You know, is it just a stroke of bad luck? Is it just a stroke of being at the wrong place at the wrong time? this story, is it wrapped up in it just happens to be a good day, being at the right place at the right time? Is it that random? Or is there a greater power behind it? Is there a bigger picture in play as the details of the story unfold? Coincidence or providence? For you ladies here this morning, as your story unfolds and your story develops in all of its plot and in all that is taking place within your personal journey, all of its joys and sorrows, all of its ups and downs mixed together, do you experience it as providence, or is it just coincidence and just happenstance? Yes, we all know here this morning that choices factor in. They always do. They always will. Elimelech made choices that mattered. Naomi made choices that mattered. Ruth and Orpah made choices that mattered. But in spite of that, there's a bigger picture, I believe, a bigger story that's unfolding that is directly related, that is providential in the story of Ruth and what God has in mind for her as she follows his heart. Ladies, this morning, God purposes, God has a design, God purposes his kingdom within your story. Coincidence is really, somebody says, just God in a costume. There's so many things in life, unless we're looking for it, that we won't recognize as the providence of God, and that God is in it and he's working out his purposes within our story. It came to pass. It came to pass within the days that the judges were ruling. It was a season and a time when the Bible says the people did what was right in their own eyes. There was moral decay. There was corruption. Sounds kind of familiar to some of today's story, right? 2 Chronicles 15, it describes this time as a long season, it says, where Israel was without the true God, without teaching priests, without the law. It says in those times there was no peace to him that went out or came in, and great vexation upon all the inhabitants of the countries. So it's during this time, this long season, that Ruth and her story begin to unfold. It came to pass. It came to pass, verse 2, there was a man named Elimelech. You know what Elimelech in Hebrew means? The Hebrew meaning of Elimelech is it's a name that means God, the Lord is king. God is king. Elimelech, God is king. That matters within this story. He's married to Naomi. The meaning of her Hebrew name is pleasant. Elimelech and Naomi have two sons, Mahlon in Hebrew, meaning sickly. Sorry, Mahlon, that's no reflection on you. And Chilion, meaning wasting. It seems like there's something about those names that would be reflective of the time and the nature of their situation that they were living in. Elimelech, Naomi, Mahlon, and Chilion, they're from the land of Bethlehem, Judah. Bethlehem literally meaning in Hebrew, the house of bread. But there's an issue here. There's a problem. It's a big problem. Because the house of bread, Elimelech, is experiencing devastating famine. There is no bread because God is judging and disciplining a rebellious people. And the famine is a way of God inviting them back to who he really is, the house of bread, the bread of life. Elimelech, meaning my God is king, decides to look elsewhere. We looked at the story this morning. He looks across the sea, and what does he see? He sees Moab, and he decides to move his family to Moab. In King James, I think it's in the NIV, it says that he decided to move to Moab and to sojourn there, to live there just for a while. And isn't that the way it often is when we're attracted to something outside of the Lord is king? We're just going to visit it a little bit. We're just going to sojourn there. But by verse 2, it says that they had settled in for the long haul. So the family, Elimelech and his family, they move to Moab. They leave the house of bread. They leave this place of promise, and they move to Moab, Sin City. Moab is an enemy of Israel. They're a cursed people. They're looked upon with contempt. Psalm 60 verse 8 says, Moab is my washpot. I will use them like slaves. I will, as it were, trample upon them because they are the lowest of the low. We know some of the backdrop of Moab. Moab was a little boy that was born to an incestuous relationship between drunk Lot and one of his daughters. The chief god of Moab was Chemosh, who was worshipped through the sacrificing of babies and children. Friends, Moab was a dark place. It hardly seems like that's the place that you would want to choose to move to and to live, right? But Elimelech did. Verse 3, already early in the move, Elimelech dies. Ruth 1, verse 3, leaving Naomi with her 2 sons in a strange land. The strange land of idolatry, no family, a different culture, different foods. I think it's hard for us to imagine here this morning how hard and how broken it really must have been for Naomi and her 2 sons. But it's only about to get worse. Because soon, her 2 sons marry foreign girls. I would think that bothered Naomi, coming from her background, knowing what God had specifically commanded their people, his people, to not do, and that is to marry strange and foreign women. But they do, her 2 sons, her 2 boys. Verse 5, 10 years later, after they've settled in, both Mahlon and Chilion also die. And I don't think we can comprehend again this morning here the loss and the grief that must have consumed Naomi's heart at that point. Her husband and her 2 boys, all that she had in a strange land, it's all gone. It's gone. Verse 6. There's a little spark of faith that turns into a little spark of hope when Naomi hears that back home in Bethlehem, the Lord has come to the aid of his people, and there's bread again. There's bread again. Naomi heard there's bread again back in Bethlehem. Verse 7, we find 3 women, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah, on a road to somewhere. And on that road to somewhere, it's decision time. Because roads are directional. Roads are destinational. And the road that Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law are standing on is somewhere between Moab and Bethlehem. Somewhere between Moab, Sin City, and Bethlehem, Judah, the land of bread. Ladies and everyone here this morning, you're on a road to somewhere. You're on a road. We read on this road together, Naomi is urging her daughters-in-law to count the cost. Go back to Moab, she says. Go back to your mother's house. Go back to your own land and remarry there. Verse 9, on this road to somewhere, the 3 women together, they lift up their voices and they weep as they contemplate their decisions. And at that moment, as they weigh their decisions, it would seem like, choose Moab and you will have everything except Yahweh. Choose Bethlehem and you will have nothing except Yahweh. And God didn't choose for them. He leaves that up to them. And for us here this morning, for you ladies, God doesn't choose for you either. You do. Verse 14, Orpah kisses Naomi goodbye, leaves her, and returns to Moab. And it's the last that we hear about Orpah. Do you think there's maybe a reason that the book isn't called Orpah, but Ruth? Verse 14, Ruth clings to Naomi saying, please don't urge me anymore. to leave you. Verse 16, where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Ruth chooses to believe. And in a sense, it's like a conversion, where Ruth enters the narrow gate, choosing to cross the barriers of race and culture and circumstance and religion. In a sense, it's like an act of repentance, where Ruth does a 180-degree turn, leaving Sin City, leaving Moab behind her, and turning towards Bethlehem, turning her heart towards the house of bread, with probably no idea that what she was stepping into was the beginning of her becoming a part of the very lineage of Christ himself. Ruth, a foreigner, an outcast, finding her place in the household of God. Verse 19, the two women, Naomi and Ruth, continue on the road to somewhere, until they come to Bethlehem. It's probably a 7 to 10 day journey. 50 miles of rugged terrain, rugged and steep terrain. Think about that. They arrive in Bethlehem, and the whole town becomes stirred with exclamation and excitement. Is this Naomi? Is she really back? Naomi's demeanor is quite less pleasant, right? It's quite different than her acquaintances and old friends and what they're thinking and feeling and giving expression to. It seems like Naomi scowls and she says, "Don't call me Naomi," meaning pleasant. "Call me Mara," meaning bitter. "I went out full. I'm returning empty. My life is filled with misfortune and affliction. I'm overwhelmed with grief. I have every reason to feel bad. Today is more than just a bad day. Let me grovel in this pit of despair. Call me bitter. That's my identity." Can I remind us this morning that bitterness is not a personality trait, but a decision? Call me bitter. Let that become my identity. And we all know this morning that when we put our mind on misery as a mission, the devil will help us harvest a bumper crop, won't he? Somebody has said, don't complain about the stink when you're crawling around in a dumpster. If your identity this morning is wrapped up in the dumpster, the comment section on social media where all happiness will die with that one negative comment, or not as many likes as your friends get. If you're dumpster diving this morning for identity, it's going to lead to bitterness. An identity that Naomi, called Mara, takes upon herself, that is not spoken by God, the bread of life, but by the broken circumstances of a broken world. But remember, at the beginning we said coincidence is God in a costume, right? For God's people, coincidence is providence. Providence behind all the events where God is weaving together his redemptive nature and plans. You ready to see some more of God's providence in the story? Look at verse 22. They arrive at Bethlehem. What does it say? When do they arrive in Bethlehem? It's at the beginning of the barley harvest. That is significant. That's significant in more ways than one. As the plot of the story itself begins to play itself out in one of the most unlikely places, and that is in a barley field. I remember barley fields from North Dakota. Barley fields are not a place where you go to party. They are some of the most itchy places when you're sweaty and dirty that you can ever find yourself, because barley is like that. Barley dust and chaff, I can just say, are awful. It's miserable. It's very miserable. The barley harvest is significant because it's an indication also of what? The bread is back. The bread is back. It's now back to where there's bread. Seasons of loss and famine, we all have them. But the barley is back. It's the beginning of the barley harvest. Will you say that with me? The bread is back. The bread is back. Say it again. The bread is back. Chapter 2. Ruth says to Naomi, "Let me go out into the fields and glean." Naomi returns to Bethlehem and says what? Let me be better. Ruth, who had also lost her husband, now no longer in her homeland, says what? Give me a field and let me glean. Do you have a field here this morning, ladies? Are you looking for a field? Have you picked a field? Pick a field. Pick a field and glean. There's nothing suggesting that Ruth is no longer grieving. For crying out loud, she just lost her husband, right? She just left her homeland, her mom and her dad and her family. Do you think she's at a place where she's no longer feeling the heaviness of the loss? I doubt it. Pick a field. She says, let me glean. She made another decision. Gleaning while grieving. She didn't let the grieving overtake her from gleaning. Gleaning doesn't mean that the field is full. It's here a little, it's there a little, bending and stooping and picking up one barley head at a time. Gleaning means you're looking for what others have missed and left behind. Gleaning for Ruth was just doing what she needed to do, just doing what needed to be done. Taking care of her household, meeting the needs of her mother-in-law, meeting the needs of bread on the table, food enough to eat. The mothering qualities that comes through the life and the heart of Ruth at this moment that has to do with tenderness and care and selfless nurturing and providing. God doesn't build his kingdom with those who leave and quit or wait for better times or easy times. The treasure is in the field. So pick a field rather than digging through the dumpster. Let me glean. Let me do what I can. Verse 3, it says that Ruth went out, and as it turned out, or as it just happened, King James says, it just happened that she ends up where? In the field of Boaz. Again, we ask, is this coincident? It just happened, or is there providence? It doesn't say that God led Ruth there, but we all know he did, right? We know he did. Verse 4, Boaz comes to his field to check on the barley harvest. Verse 5, he says, who is this young lady? Who is this damsel? Who does she belong to? Where did she come from? He notices her in the field. Verse 6, the overseer, the servant, replies, we don't know her name. She's a Moabite. There you go. She's labeled. She has a title. She's a Moabitess woman. But she's a Moabite woman who has come back to Bethlehem with Naomi. But there's something strange about this woman. She's polite in a way that a lot aren't, because she asked us permission here this morning to be able to glean in the field. And not only that, she not only asked permission, but she has remained here from morning until right now. Just a short rest, and she's right back to gleaning. Underline that. She remained until now. Perseverance, pushing through, still in the field, still gleaning. Are you still in the field this morning? Making it on short rests? Maybe cat naps at the kitchen sink while doing dishes? You know, I can't help but think about my own mom when I think about that, and I'm ashamed at how much I took so for granted for so long. Mom was in the kitchen in her field. 3 meals a day for 10 people. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, without a complaint. She remained. And if you're listening this morning, I say I love you, thank you, and I appreciate that. Verse 8, Boaz seizes on a little one-on-one time with Ruth. Maybe their first unofficial date, right? And notice his opening line. Listen to me, my girl. Now that's quite an opening line, right? Listen to me, my girl. Stay here in this field. It's my field. Stay here. Come back tomorrow. You're welcome. And while you're here, just stay close to the rest of the girls. And just so you know, I've instructed the young men to leave you alone. He includes a no harassment statement. Pretty neat, right? And there's a little more. When you get thirsty, just help yourself to the men's water jars. Listen to me, my girl. Listen. Verse 10. Ruth, kind of kneeling before her. Ah, why are you so kind to me? That also can trigger and stir some emotions, right? Ah, you're so kind to me. Why? Why this favor? Why this favor to me who am just a Moabite, a stranger in the land? Verse 11, Moab says, because Ruth, the secret is out. We've heard about you. We've done some homework. And we know all about your story, what you have done for your mother-in-law Naomi since the death of your husband, how you have left your father and mother in your homeland to come and live with a people you did not know. May the Lord richly repay and reward you for what you have done. May you find refuge under the wings of the God of Israel. Verse 14, we find Boaz and Ruth sitting and drinking together. Maybe their second date. They're probably smiling and maybe even starting to make eyes at each other. I don't know. I'm just assuming. Verse 17, that evening, Ruth returns home to Naomi, and she has a whole ephah, however you say it, of barley. Now, I don't know how much that is, but it's obviously quite impressive for a day of gleaning. Can we say it again? The bread is back. The bread is back. It's the first glimpse of fullness emerging out of emptiness. Luke 15, in my Father's house is what? In my Father's house there's bread enough to spare. I will arise and go to him. I will arise and go back to the house of bread. The one who seeks will find. And I can imagine that evening as Ruth and Naomi interact and exchange some of the events of the day. Ruth is beginning to feel some of the rewards of being in the field, some of the excitement, some of the anticipation, some of the fulfillment, remaining in the field, fulfilling her responsibilities, and finding enough bread to eat. And not only that, but she sees a smile returning to the face of her mother-in-law, Naomi, that she has a part in. But there's more. Second Chronicles 16, verse 9, the eyes of the Lord do what? The eyes of the Lord scan. The eyes of the Lord run to and fro. Where? Throughout the whole earth to do what? To show himself strong on behalf of those who love him. The eyes of the Lord were running to and fro that day, and his eyes were fastened on Ruth and the decisions that she was making and the faithfulness of her mothering heart. And while Ruth is busy looking for barley, Boaz, the Redeemer, finds her. She's not looking for Boaz, she's looking for barley. But Boaz, the Redeemer, finds her, her kinsman Redeemer. Get into your field, remain in the field, and learn to know what it is to be found by your Redeemer, where he will do more for you than you can ask or think, because his eyes run to and fro upon the earth to show himself strong on behalf of those who love him. Chapter 4, verse 10, Ruth becomes the wife of Boaz. Verse 11, the elders say, we are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman, Ruth, who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah. There's significance in that. We don't have time to get into that. Who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephratah and be famous in Bethlehem through the offspring that the Lord gives you through this young woman. May your family be like that of Perez. Again, there's significance there, whom Tamar has bore to Judah. Verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth of his wife, and 9 months later she gives birth to a little boy. He's named Obed, who becomes the father of Jesse, who becomes the father of David. And like Paul Harvey says, we know the rest of the story, right? Verse 16, we have Naomi, who said, let me be bitter, is now holding a little baby in her arms. There's new life, there's new joy, there's new purpose. The one who said, I went out full, but came back empty, can now say, I came back empty, but I'm now made full. Zechariah 4, through the prophet, it says, do not despise the days of small things. Mothers here this morning, your mothering heart, do not despise the days of small things. Do not despise the days of small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Just a quick recap. Hardship and loss, it's part of the story. It's your story, it's Ruth's story. It's the part of every story. Sacrificial living, it's what we're called to. It's either a focus on self or on others. Bitterness, it's a choice. It's a hard taskmaster when you choose it. In the field, the treasures are in the field. The field doesn't come to you. You go to the field. Gleaning while grieving, remaining until now. Looking for barley, but then being noticed and found by Boaz the Redeemer. The bread is back. Those who faithfully seek shall find. And a baby, new life that is birthed and born where joy comes in the morning. It comes together. It's going to come together. As God works all things together for good through his providence and not just coincidence or happen chance. Ladies here this morning, I just want to, again in closing, bless your mothering, heart, and spirit. Blessings on your story as you live out and reflect the heart of Jesus through some of the ways that Naomi's story models for us. God bless you each. I'll turn it over to Dallas.